Welcome to Meet the Red Cross. I'm Dave Griffith, the Executive Director for the Heart of Missouri chapter, and joining me on this edition of Meet the Red Cross is Steve Stacey, one of our dedicated volunteers who was recently deployed to what is now being called Superstorm Sandy, and we're going to be visiting with him in the first part of the show. And then in the second half of the show, I also was deployed, and so I'm going to be telling my story about some of the things that happened to me while I was there in New York. Steve, welcome back to the show. You've been a guest on our show before.
Yes, I have, a couple times.
Glad to have you back, and I'm really glad that you were a part of the Heart of Missouri team that went out to Hurricane Sandy and served there. When did you actually get deployed?
Well, I got called, I was running around getting everything together on Halloween. So that's when I was getting my flights and getting everything lined up, and the next day I left.
You might just tell, and for a lot of people that don't know, the process that we go through, that goes through for a volunteer, or actually even for a staff member to be deployed. How does that happen?
Well, you have yourself available through our system here, and after you've had your training of making yourself available for national deployment, and then you'll get a call and ask if are you ready to respond for this one, and you either say yes or you can't respond to that one at all. And if you say yes, you have 24 hours to pack your gear up and get ready to deploy and get your flight, and you're out of there.
Okay. Now, where were you deployed to?
I was deployed to New Jersey, and actually the middle part of New Jersey on the coast, a town called Toms River.
Okay. And while you were there, you got a specialty. I mean, you're actually a supervisor, is that correct?
I'm a supervisor, and this one here, I stepped up and became a manager of a kitchen. And doesn't mean I do cooking, but it was a manager of our mobile feeding operations, and we have IRVs. Now, what's an IRV? An IRV is an emergency response vehicle. It's those red and white vehicles that Red Cross is famous for, serving food out of the IRV itself, or taking food to shelters and fixed locations for feeding.
Mm-hmm. And how many people were you feeding?
Well, we had built up to about 12,000 meals a day.
Oh my! And
averaged 8 to 10. Highest point were about 12,000. Okay. So I had 20 IRVs in our operation, and feeding out of a parking lot where the Southern Baptist provided the mobile cooking kitchen, and where we provide the food, they cook the food, and then we deliver the food.
Now, you might talk about, there's in a lot of the disaster responses that we go to, one of the key partnerships we do have is with the Southern Baptist.
Yes.
You might tell us about that relationship and how they're mobilized.
That is such a fantastic organization. Very well equipped. They have several types of layers of kitchens, some that can do 10,000 meals, 15,000 meals, all the way up to 30,000 meals a day. So depending on which kitchen you're working out of, what your capabilities are. And this was a 15,000 meal kitchen that sets up in a parking lot, usually at a Baptist church, and then they do all their cooking. They have all their staff. They bring their staff in for a week at a time, 5 to 7 days, and they usually stay at the church. And then they do the 2 hot meals a day, and they fix breakfast and stuff for themselves also.
Okay. Well, I know when I was in the service, I could see, and I spent some time on KP, and I remember how the cooks there would cook for 500 or 600 men, but. Mm-hmm. How do you even begin to cook for 22,000 meals? How do you begin to do that?
Well, being a kitchen manager, luckily I don't have to do the cooking, and that's totally on the Baptist hands. So their whole organization, they are the hardest working people I've ever met. You know, we put a lot of hours in too, but they sleep right on the spot. So if something happens, they're just instantly right there. And any emergency call we have, they're going to throw couple extra 100 meals or whatever onto an emergency call as fast as they can get it to us. So it's absolutely amazing. We have semi-trailers for on the lot that are completely full of our food supplies, and that's their coolers and freezers, and where they stock all their food. They go to the semis.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about how that is restocked first, but in a minute. But first I want to talk about the 20 emergency response vehicles you had, and where would they go? And you filled them twice. Is that correct? Twice a day?
Twice a day for lunch and dinner, and we would do S&S, search and serve. It means we'd go down into the areas that were affected and actually drive down the streets with our horns and sound system and tell people we have hot meals. And after a while, they would get to know that we're in that area, and we would serve them 2 meals a day. We'd also serve the shelters that were open, and then we'd community centers and things like that. We would also provide several hundred meals to however big that facility was. But with the 20 IRVs that we had, I had about, at the highest, I had about 90 people under my responsibility. Mostly around 70, and then it went up to about 90 for a while. But that's quite a task, organizing 20 vehicles and spreading them out. We have to map the area totally out, give them routes and give them territories, and then whatever orders we get that a call comes in, another shelter is set up, or another community center is set up, or some place that we wasn't on our radar all of a sudden gets a call into us. We try to provide that meal as fast as we possibly can and juggle those meals around. When they call in the afternoon for a meal that evening, that makes it real tough because that meal is usually being prepared earlier in the day, X amount of meals, and sometimes we have to put a fudge factor in for meals just for the unknown.
Okay. You initially responded to the hurricane, and you get out there, and then the nor'easter hits.
Oh my, yes.
And so how did that throw a big wrench into the whole operation at that time of getting those IRVs back out to those locations?
That's a major storm within a major storm. We end up getting lots and lots of rain, then it went to freezing, and then it got really cold, and we end up with 14 inches of wet, heavy snow. Just as electricity was all coming back on in the areas, that heavy snow broke down thousands of more trees and put everybody out in the dark again. So that was a real challenge for us. But it was interesting, how do you remove that much snow just to get around? And we actually had to shut down operations for one day just because we were not able to be mobilized at all.
So after the one day of shutting down, did their Department of Transportation get out with their plow trucks and get things cleaned off where you could get IRVs back in those affected areas you had been serving before?
Yeah. Obviously, with Sandy, that was one of this nation's highest priority. So there was really fast service in doing that. Even on our own parking lot, we had our forklift, and we took a pile of pallets and put a plyboard in front of it, and that became our snow plow. So, and we had to face the snow for several days after until it finally melted off. But that was a major challenge, and to prepare for that, we tried to get all of our shelters and our community centers filled up with MREs, meals ready to eat, the hot meals, so that if we couldn't make delivery, they would not go without any food.
All right. Now you mentioned the MREs, the meals that are ready to eat. Now the types of meals that were being cooked by the Southern Baptist and that you were delivering in those IRVs, were those in styrofoam boxes, or how were those being served?
We have our storage boxes are called Cambros, and they're great big red insulated containers that can hold a couple hundred meals each in them. And then from there, we have several of those, and we fill those individually up in the clamshells, the styrofoam food containers, and we provide the service out of those. If it's a fixed feeding site, we drop the Cambro off and then pick it up at the next meal, the empties. Okay.
Now, let's get back to those big semi-trailer trucks that we were talking about earlier.
Sure.
Those were filling of those and the maintenance of those to see how much food you had in those. Was that your responsibility, or was that something that the Southern Baptist took care of?
We share both that responsibility, because we used a lot of snacks and a lot of foods and stuff like that, and we would order them through U.S. Foods or through Cisco. We have a national contract with them, and they provide that food. Some of the other food that that the Baptists would be using, they would keep track of that and do inventories every single day. But so between both of us, we would place one big order of our supplies. And usually, if I ordered clamshells, I would order 20,000 at a time. You know, that sounds like a lot, but you go through food pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. And how often did you do that?
Well, you had to, for perishables and stuff, we had to usually make our orders 3 or 4 times, or 3 or 4 days apart, usually enough for that. I will also order for breakfast, even though we didn't serve breakfast. I don't order for breakfast for 3 or 4 days in advance so the fruit don't go bad and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And then drop them off at one time and leave the shelters with 3 or 4 days of breakfast supplies.
Okay. Well, we just got the information back from the very first month that we were there, and in that first month that the Red Cross was serving there, we served 7.7 million meals in those affected states, and you know, that it's almost hard to wrap your mind around that many meals, but you know, when we break it down, that you were serving 22,000 meals twice a day.
12,000.
12,000. Well, 24,000 meals a day. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty significant number.
Yeah.
We're just about out of time, Steve. But I want I want to thank you. But I want you to tell people where you stayed while you were out there.
You never know where you're going to stay. On different jobs, I've stayed anywhere from the roof of an airport to pup tents to half torn apart motel rooms, and this time I stayed in some nicer motel rooms where they didn't have water or electricity or anything like that. They were dark rooms, and or heat. And then we moved into some gymnasiums, and most of my time there I spent in a gymnasium with between 100 and 150 people as a staff shelter.
Okay.
In there.
And there is a difference between the staff shelter and the shelters we have for those clients.
Yes, we keep them separate for the simple fact that we need to have the time for our rest and get away from it too, just so that we're ready for the next day. Otherwise, there's no time for rest, and you wear down pretty quick.
And how long were you there?
I was there 19 days.
Okay. Well, Steve, I just want to tell you, really, the chapter is proud of what you've been able to do and the training that you've gone through to be able to deliver those services. And and for those of you that are out there that are wondering how you might be a part of that, there's training you do need to go through. We don't send somebody out there that hasn't had the proper training. And while you're there, you can get what I call field promotions. And I'm going to talk about that here in my part of the segment, but. Steve, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your story, and we'll probably have a recap after this is all said and done. We'll come back and I want to try and bring everybody that was out there at least on the show.
And you know, Dave, one time my life was threatened in a storm, and I almost lost my life, and someone was there for me. In my life now is I want to be there for someone who's in trouble too.
Well, God bless you. We'll be right back with the second part of our show after this.
Folks, why won't we go to the doctor? My uncle called, speech all slurred, complaining his arms numb. He called everyone. He even called my daughter Tiara, because, you know, she's got a year of nursing. Everyone thinks he needs to go to the doctor, including me. So he said, well, will you take me? I'm like, I'm on the road. He goes, I'll wait. Stroke's no joke. If you or someone you love have symptoms of stroke, don't wait. It may be too late. Dial 911. Time loss is brain loss.
Welcome back to Meet the Red Cross. I'm Dave Griffith, the Executive Director of the Heart of Missouri chapter, and as I said at the beginning of the show, I was actually deployed myself. I got in touch with our regional CEO and told her that if there was an opportunity for me to be able to go, that I would like to. She had talked with me back when Hurricane Isaac had hit down in the southern part of the country. And at that particular time, I wasn't able to respond to that that disaster. But when when Hurricane Sandy came along, she made some calls, and I was able to go. We were talking with Steve about the process, about how that happens, and it does happen pretty quickly. I got a call that came on my answering machine, and I've learned that I need to check my answering machine more often because I didn't check it until 9:30 on a Sunday evening. And when I talked with our person that was in St. Louis that was deploying us, she said, your flight leaves at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I spent most of the rest of that evening starting packing, and I got up at 3:30 and finished packing, and then got on an airplane out of St. Louis and flew to New York City, to JFK. And I began my deployment in a place called White Plains, New York. And in White Plains, that is where all those that are going to be working out of New York, in the northern part, that's where they started. And so I spent the first night at a YMCA there in White Plains. And like Steve, it was a staff shelter. We had about 120 men and women that were all in this one shelter. And it had been a while since I was in the service that I actually slept in a bay full of people like that. But and our health and safety coordinator said, you need to take earplugs. And I didn't really understand what that meant until that first night when I was there. And I know my wife tells me that I snore, but I can tell you that there were some there that did a whole lot better job of that than what I do. But we went after that first night, we went to the headquarters office that is there in White Plains. We went through a briefing as to what we could expect during our deployment, went through some do's and don'ts. We made sure that everyone had a staff card that they were able to buy their meals and to pay for taxis and those kind of things that we had to do. And then we went from there to the headquarters of the Greater New York chapter. And it was a regional chapter. And when I arrived there, I was working in community partnerships. And community partnerships has a number of different areas. One is labor liaison, another is faith-based communities, and another is government relations. And I worked, when I met with our chief, one of the first things that he said was, have you ever been in a union? And back when I was in high school, I worked at a brick plant, and I had to join the union then. And when I worked at a TV station, we were unionized there as well. And so I told him, yeah, I've been a shop steward in the union. And he said, well, that qualifies you for labor liaison. So for the first 4 days of my deployment, I worked with the Teamsters Union and the IBEW, which is International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And I worked with them to try and mobilize them to provide services for the Red Cross. And the biggest thing we were looking for were drivers. When Steve was talking about the trailers, and there were box trucks that we had to have qualified people that would be able to drive those to the different locations where we were distributing those services and those goods. And we had the weekend before I got there, we had done the first big push where we were trying to get out to as many people as we could. And Long Island was the area that I was assigned to. And I went to a labor council meeting. We made a presentation to them and really tried to mobilize as many of those folks as we could. IBEW Local 25, that is out of New York, had 2,500 members. And I talked with their business representative, and he said anything that we can do to provide help. We can work in warehouses. We can drive box trucks. They weren't much on driving forklifts, but that they would provide us with the kind of services that we needed. So that was one thing that I was very impressed with, was how there was a need that was there, and the local there was going to try and help to do what they can to erase that. After those first 4 days that I spent with Labor Liaison, I went to our chief, and I told him, I said, one of the main reasons I came out here is I wanted to go out into the field, because I wanted to be able to tell a story. And the story that I'm telling you today is one that I told to a Lions Club this last week. And And I shared this story also with my staff, and I felt it's important that that we let people know exactly what we're doing, and we let people know that are donating their hard-earned dollars to the American Red Cross as to where those are going. So I'm going to, this was one of the first scenes, we went into Coney Island, and this was one of the first scenes in Coney Island that we came across. The sand that you're seeing right here actually came out of a building that was right next door to it. This car, well, the sand came from the beach, but the car came from a parking garage that was right below, and I'll point that out to you here in just a few minutes. This this slide here really kind of indicates to you the information that we got back here at the local chapter. Mike Flanagan, our communications director, this is the information where he got that he got daily and tried and pushed this out to the newspapers and radio and television to let them know the number of services, what we were doing on that particular day and the day before. This has on it information such as how many meals that we served, how many shelters we had open, how many people were staying in those shelters. Those numbers were updated daily, and it also were numbers that also reflected back how many people we had served up to that particular point. This little place right here, this at one point in time was a beachfront restaurant, kind of a tiki bar type place where you can go by and you can get a hamburger, a hot dog, soda. This was at point zero. This is where the storm had hit in Coney Island, and it was completely destroyed. This building here is a geriatric center, a Jewish geriatric center, and this is where that car that you saw, that SUV you saw a little earlier, that's where that came from. And the sand that you saw that was out there came from right here. So, and it brushed all this on storm. One of the things that I also was very impressed, that I didn't know before I went out there was, and I guess I should have realized it, that if you have a city of 25 million people, they got to stay somewhere, and not every single one of them can have a house. Most of the people that we were seeing lived in these high-rise apartments, and if you can see back behind here in Coney Island, there were 15 of these high-rise apartments, and when the storm came in, it came in through the and all the basement, and the water level was right up to here. So all the electricity, all the boilers, everything that was there was in the basement, and so they lost all of their electricity, and by losing their electricity, they lost their elevators. And this is where AmeriCorps, Vista, the Mormons, and really volunteers from all over the country. This is where they played a vital role in going into each one of these buildings and knocking on doors and making sure that people were okay and delivering meals to them. The sad thing is that a lot of the people that live in these buildings were older folks, and they just couldn't go up and down the stairs. And having those younger people be able to climb all those stairs and check on them to make sure they were okay was just absolutely awesome. This is downtown. This is one of the main drags in Coney Island, and you could go anywhere you wanted to in downtown Coney Island, and this is the kind of scene that you would see. People had gone in, and this was on, I believe it was the 18th or 19th of November, and they had already started their recovery process. They were going into buildings and just pulling out woodwork and putting out drywall and all that. We walked down a street, and this street here is typical in Coney Island. I could have gone down any one of these streets and found this was a love seat and sofa, along with a chair that looked fairly new, but it had been covered with water. The water line went right up to here, so everything that was on the first floor actually had to come outside, and these were just, this entire street was just filled with trash bags, and to see how that all the stuff that they had that was on the inside and how that was out. You can't really see real well, but when I took this picture here, there was a woman that was going through that trash back there trying to find clothes. All of her clothes had been destroyed or gone, and we really wanted to go up to her and tell her that you don't need to take those clothes, because the bacteria and the mold that was there, present there then, is worse now. But this is a typical scene in Coney Island. This is a different shot down this same street to where you can see the entire street. And I took this picture because there were two ServPro trucks. These people are fortunate because they have insurance. And by having insurance, they're starting their recovery process. The other sad thing that really came to light was that a lot of those people did not have insurance. And by not having insurance, those are many of the people that were living and still are living in shelters there in New York and New Jersey, and we're providing meals for them. But they're beginning the recovery process here. Here again, this is just this is the back of this one building, to where a lot of this are supplies that have been used by them, and they've just discarded the boxes there and haven't been picked up yet. We came across this scene because we had talked with the police, the local police station there, and we asked them some places we could go and that we could try and mobilize and see an awful lot of people. And this right behind us here is where is a baseball field. A semi-professional baseball team plays there. In this line here, they had served over that weekend 3,000 to 5,000 people every day, and this was just a food line. And I think what I also was impressed with is that everything was orderly. I mean, they weren't trying to button line. They weren't trying to push somebody out of the way. They were all there. They were smiling. They were laughing. They were kidding around with each other. This is the food line there where they're getting their food. Just wanted to show you how long that line is. The Red Cross doesn't give out clothes, but these folks needed clothes. And as we saw from that one slide where this woman is going through trash trying to find clothes. These people here, that you can't see that there are a series of minivans that are set up there, and what they have done, many of them were from their churches, different businesses that all came together and just brought gently used clothing, and they put it in the back of those vans, and then they opened them up and they passed them out to whoever wanted them. And this too also was done in a very orderly manner. This is like my partner, Steven, and Steven and I rode together for 2 days. This is one of the Teamsters that was driving these the box trucks. I took this picture here because I wanted to show that this is where the services are being delivered. I mean, you talk about where the rubber meets the road, this is where it was. Steven and I pulled up, and they were unloading this box truck which had cleanup supplies. And we pulled the car over, jumped out, and I jumped in the back of the pickup, back of the box truck, and started unloading, helping them unload unload the truck. I did that until I started passing out too much stuff. We had diapers that we were giving, and I gave away an entire case of diapers to one lady, and they said, no, we don't give that many out at one time. And so they put me on the ground, and I started passing out supplies from there. While we were passing them out, this Irv comes driving down the road. And when he said, what can we do? I said, we need to park right here, and that's where you need to be. Well, my experience, I can go on for probably another 30 minutes. But I want to tell you the one thing and I want to leave you with one thought about what's going on in New York and New Jersey and along the coast. When you've got that many people, you wonder how they're all going to work together. And they cluster in communities and neighborhoods. And the one thing that I was proudest of is that they came together as a community. It reminded me of what happened in 9/11 when we came together as Americans. We weren't Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians, but we were Americans. And that's what's happening right now in New York City. Thank you for your support of the American Red Cross. It's because of your support that we're able to provide these kind of services. So until next time, I'm Dave Griffith.